Hello and welcome to TRT World. This is the News Hour, live with me, Oscar Sabakti. Throughout the hour, we'll be bringing you special coverage from across Syria as it navigates a path towards a new future after more than a decade of civil war. Our correspondents are standing by in key locations across the region. Randolph Nogul is in the capital, Damascus. Mohammed Al-Qasim joins us from the occupied Golan Heights. And Hassan Abdullah is in Jarablus in northern Syria. But first, let's bring you the latest developments from Syria. As Syria's new government begins to take shape, it's promising stability over conflict. But at least one Western power is being cautious, with the US saying Syria will be judged on actions, not words. It comes as the newly appointed Prime Minister Mohammed al-Bashir called on Syrians abroad to return home, saying the rights of all people would be guaranteed. But after more than a decade of war, significant hurdles remain, including tough economic conditions and crumbling infrastructure. TRT World's Victoria Innes begins our coverage.
There are many questions still for Syria. Perhaps top of the list is which way the country will turn now. Asked what his message was to foreign countries who might be worried about what comes next, the leader of the opposition said their fears are unnecessary. It's going towards stability. People are exhausted from the war, so the country isn't ready for another. He said the removal of Iranian militias, Hezbollah and the regime is the solution. It comes as a new government begins to take shape, with Mohammed al-Bashir appointed Prime Minister. But as countries warn against assuming automatic leadership, that democracy must prevail.
Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is using the right words, but we will of course judge them not by those words, but by their actions over the coming days, the coming weeks, the coming months.
There is optimism nonetheless.
In a country that has suffered so much, we hope that this new dawn for Syria will lead to sustained peace.
Syrian opposition groups have released footage from inside Deir ez-Zor, confirming they have taken what is the largest city in the east. Meanwhile, Israel is continuing its own operation. Footage here showing Israeli tanks in the southwest of the country. It follows hundreds of airstrikes. And Russia says it has been in touch with the new leadership about its naval bases on the coast. It all comes as more and more people return home, continuing to cross neighbouring borders, while others go to find their loved ones, to bring them home, searching hospital morgues and prisons and praying for news. As euphoria wears off and life begins to return to normal, the challenge ahead comes into focus. Rebuilding Syria is an enormous task, especially when the world is watching. Victoria Innes, TRT World.
Well, let's go straight to Damascus now and speak with our Randolph Nogul. Hi there, Randy. We know that on Sunday it was announced that Bashar al-Assad was no longer in Syria. Rebels, fighters, captured the city in lightning speed. Bring us up to speed on the latest, because we know that since that day we've seen celebrations across the Syrian capital, but we've also seen the reality set in that Syria will now need to chart a new path. What's the latest there?
That's right. This is a fragile time for Syria. While there is jubilation on the streets, this country is currently contending with a number of issues, certainly security issues. The new opposition is trying to consolidate its control over the country, including here in Damascus. That's being made harder by numerous Israeli airstrikes targeting all of the Syrian defense that's left over from Bashar al-Assad. Certainly, the first few days after the revolution were tense because there were fighters in the streets firing into the air. Certainly still scenes of jubilation, people celebrating, but perhaps a bit of an anxious calm, so to say. But then gradually what we've seen over the past few days is that businesses are beginning to open. People are able to get some of the things that they weren't able to get when over the tense weekend when this revolution came and swept in really out of nowhere, surprising many people people weren't prepared. I actually visited Al-Marja Square in Damascus, just at the edge of the old city, and to give a sense of how things have changed. Well, here in Damascus, today feels like a more normal day. Opposition forces instructed their fighters not to fire into the air. One of the reasons, of course, that many of the shops were closed. You can see here that business is picking back up. People are getting back to a sense of normalcy. Obviously, the shockingly fast charge by the opposition left many here in complete surprise, not having withdrawn enough money. So, of course, today, long queues at the bank. The central bank has assured people that their deposits are safe. This new administration of power will try to shore up a number of institutions, including banks, including governance, including security. We spoke to some of the people here about how they feel about a new era for Syria.
The happiness of the Syrian people cannot be described. More than happy. All of the sects, all Syrians. And as for the banking system, I was in the bank today and everything was fine.
There is no banking crisis in the country. Under Assad, we could not talk about US dollar. They will cut your tongue. Now we can talk about dollar, rial, Turkish lira, and sterling, whatever. It is normal.
The opposition's commander, Ahmed al-Shara, has assured people that he's going to oversee the transition of power to an interim government to be led by al-Bashir, someone with experience in the Idlib province, a technocrat, someone with a background in law and engineering, certainly giving a lot of people here hope, along with the remnants of the Assad government, ministers who want to see a transition to democratic rule and pluralism in Syria. Well, as you can imagine, there are a lot of underground secrets, literally, that are coming out of the woodwork. This was an incredibly closed state under Bashar al-Assad, and one of the grislier aspects of that are the thousands of prisoners that have been released. While that's joyous for many people, there's also a lot of tragedy with people seeing the kinds of conditions that their loved ones were subjected to, and many have, of course, gone missing. Then there are those that have undergone torture, filling up hospitals, certainly many cases of trauma, psychological distress. Noor Kamouche sent this report from a state hospital here in Damascus.
We are here now at Ibn al-Nafis hospital in the city of Damascus, as thousands of people are coming to this hospital to get the healthcare and medical services amid a huge shortage in the basic necessities and consumables in this hospital, according to the staff that is currently working in this hospital. And they also told us that the hospital suffers a lot from shortage in medical equipment, in the staff, and is currently working at its full capacity, trying to provide these services to the people in this area, hosting and receiving thousands of people over the capacity of the hospital. The staff also told us that the detainees that were released from the fallen Assad regime come here to get the medical services after the malnutrition and their deteriorating health situation due to severe and hard detention process and situation. Of course, the medical situation here in Damascus and in Syria in general needs the international community's attention, according to the people here, and needs support for this hospital to keep on functioning and keep on providing their medical services amid ambiguous future and non-stable situation at this current phase.
I'm one of the doctors who have been here since the beginning of the problems. We received many patients, be it civilians or released detainees. We faced many challenges, especially when it comes to the number of doctors. We lack medicine, nurses, and equipment.
The most important thing is that we want the international community to be with us. We need all kind of support, so we keep going forward. For a long time, we were in need of key materials, and I hope the coming period will be better.
One of the major challenges that this new administration of power will face is how to pick their country up out of poverty. Certainly over the years, this war-torn country, many people have been displaced, as many as 27 million Syrians, 17 million in need of humanitarian aid, 90% live below the poverty line. The UN had asked for $4 billion to help Syria just to cope through the year. Only a third of that's been delivered. We spoke with the International Committee of the Red Cross to get a better sense of the situation right now.
The numbers that we are hearing sound pretty catastrophic, and we should not forget the stark and dire reality of every single person and every single family behind these numbers. It is clear that many people may want to go back to their homes as soon as possible, but it's also we need to think about what people have to return to, because there's been a lot of destruction, and the infrastructure, the essential infrastructure like water and electricity has been functioning at about 50% of capacity in the past years. And like if we see people returning, the consumption is going to increase, putting more pressure on these essential services. So indeed, the humanitarian situation in Syria has been incredibly difficult in the past years, and I'm afraid that we are looking at a very difficult situation as we look forward. It is indeed a very difficult issue, because very often we forget about the most vulnerable families, displaced people, people living in camps, people who don't have access to the commodities, even if they are available at the market. And the agriculture has been very heavily impacted, and there's a lot of exports. And now, of course, in the current situation, the prices are inevitably going up. We are now still dealing with a very quickly evolving and changing situation where our colleagues on the ground, they're trying to go out, they're trying to go and visit the most vulnerable people, displaced people, to try to assess and see what the situation is like for them and what are the most urgent needs are, so we can support them. But also, as you have mentioned very rightly so, that the humanitarian support, it's like trying to extinguish a fire. It cannot be a response. It cannot be a replacement for a functioning economy, and cannot substitute a functioning economy for an entire country's population.
Given the drastic levels of poverty and struggle in this country, one thing that of course adds injury to insult is the lavish lifestyle that Bashar al-Assad himself was living. People have been going to both of the presidential palaces to get a glimpse of what their former leader, how their former leader lived. While he may have ruled with an iron fist, inside you can see he lived a very delicate and ornate lifestyle. Earlier I visited one of those presidential palaces here in Damascus, and I sent this report. Well, this is one of two palaces in Damascus that was under the control of Bashar al-Assad. This is actually where he and his wife Asma slept. Now, walking through this ornate palace, you see messages scrawled on the walls, greetings from the revolution, also damning him and his father, obviously known for his own period of brutal repression in this country. Only the finest artisans, the finest craftsmen were designing this palace. You can see there's a big difference between how Bashar al-Assad lived and his citizens in a country where 90% of the people live below the poverty line.
May God take revenge on him. He was living a very luxurious life in a state of extravagance, while his people were dying of hunger and living in the streets.
It's very hard to understand how they were living here while the people are suffering.
The TRT World team has confirmed that Israeli troops have entered the southern province of Quneitra. So even as they are bombing all around the country, they have boots on the ground now. Our correspondent Obeda Hito actually went to the gates of Quneitra province and sent us this report.
We are in Khan al-Arnabe in southern Syria in Quneitra province, and just a few hundred meters behind me is an Israeli tank. Over the less than 2 weeks, Israeli forces have taken advantage of this power vacuum that has emerged in Syria as Syrian opposition forces have toppled the Syrian regime to advance into Syrian territory. They've taken at least 5 kilometers more territory outside of the Golan Heights into Quneitra province. Right now, we're at the southern exit of this town, and the people here are telling us that the civilians in these towns that Israeli troops have entered are being treated very poorly. They've cut off electricity and water. They're not being allowed to leave their homes, and they are even shooting at people that try and come to speak to these troops. People here are extremely scared, and they're not sure about what might happen next. We're hearing a lot of condemnations from countries around the world, including Ankara, which has said that Israeli advances into these territories is unacceptable. But according to what we're hearing from locals here in Khan al-Arnabe, is that the Israeli troops are moving forward inch by inch every day, and they're afraid that this won't stop without international intervention.
Well, let's go across the border right now to the occupied Golan Heights, where our correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasim is. Mohammed, I wanted to ask you, obviously Israel has been saying that all of these actions that it's been taking across Syria, including boots on the ground, is in an effort to protect its interests in the occupied Golan Heights. Give us the latest, and do you get a sense that their ambitions go beyond that?
Well, that's correct, Randy. Israel has advanced its troops and tanks well beyond the buffer zone. And we've just heard from our colleague Obaida Hito, who verified that an Israeli tank was present in Khan Arnabe, which is in the Quneitra area, 5 kilometers beyond the buffer zone. And when we posed the questions earlier in the day to the Israeli military spokesman, Daniel Hagari, who gave a briefing to journalists here in the occupied Golan Heights, he insisted that Israel had no interest in occupying Syrian territory, and saying that all these measures that Israel has taken so far, those are defensive and preventative measures, trying to keep away any hostile parties from getting closer to the borders with Israel. But when we posed the question to him about that, we know for a fact that Israeli forces have gone beyond the buffer zone, and that Israel has took a decision on its own to cancel the disengagement treaty that was signed in 1974 with Syria. He resisted that, and he also denied the fact that what the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a couple of days ago, that Israel will keep any Syrian territory it occupies. Let's listen to what Daniel Hagari said when we posed these questions to him. You say that Israeli tanks did not cross deep into Syrian territory, even though one of your tanks was seen in the village of Khan Arnabe. In fact, one of the reporters was about 100 meters away from an Israeli tank yesterday. So even though you say that Israeli tanks didn't really cross deep into Syrian territory, but they in fact were, one tank at least was seen in the village of Khan Arnabe. That's one. Secondly, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself said that Israel has and will assert its control over strategic locations, and Israel will never relinquish that territory back again to Syria. That's in contrast to what your boss, the defense minister, and the foreign minister have said, that it's limited and temporary measures.
This is limited and temporary measures to make sure that the buffer zone is safe. I don't think it's in contrast. It's going to be limited and temporary until we will see it's stable. You say Khan Arnabe. I don't know how many people know where is Khan Arnabe. It's not Damascus. Khan Arnabe is not Damascus. It's not far away from the buffer zone. So
but it's outside the buffer zone.
It's outside, but it's very close to the. No, but it's important for people. You know, people. You know,
Damascus is only 60 kilometers from here.
Yeah, you know, Khan Arnabe is not 40 kilometers and it's not 50 kilometers. It's very close to the buffer zone. So in the first stage, when we entered into control positions on the buffer zone, we were close to villages. So people took footage of a tank. We're not inside the villages. We're not controlling the villages. We don't want that. We're not looking for that. We're looking for the safety and security of the buffer zone, the safety and security of this border. This is what we're doing.
So, Randy, basically what Hagari was trying to do in this briefing is to clarify Israel's position. He was trying to tell the Arab world, and he kept saying, we want to tell the Arab world that we're not headed towards Damascus, that we're not interested in occupying Syrian territory. But the facts on the ground speak completely of a different story. And when we asked him also about Israel carrying out probably the largest air campaign against Syria, destroying helicopters, war jets, military bases, airports, a stockpile of weapons across Syria, destroying the Navy fleet and Navy vessels. He said that this is all so these weapons don't fall into the wrong hands, and he kept repeating claims that maybe they will fall into Iran, Hezbollah's hands, or even into opposition groups that are not so friendly. But at the same time, he was basically denying what his boss, Israel Katz, the defense minister, has said, and also what the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said himself a few days ago right here in the occupied Golan Heights, when he said that Israel will keep these territories that has taken or occupied from the Syrian regime army, which is now it's the Syrian. This is an army that belongs to the Syrian people. Even the Mount Hermon, which is right to my right here, Israel has taken over a position that belonged to the Syrian army, and according to the prime minister, Israel will not give it back. So on one hand, the Israeli military spokesman has a different statement, a different narrative, while his bosses, the prime minister and his defense minister, have completely a different narrative and a different story to tell the world. So again, Israel is trying to kind of clean up after all this mess, but what we know for sure is that officially Israel has said that it has taken over the buffer zone, Randy.
Absolutely, Mohammed. Thank you so much for parsing through all of that messaging. It sounds like there's a lot to wade through there. We're going to turn now back to the Syrian opposition's battle to control all of the territory, and we know that in the eastern city of Deir ez-Zor, the Syrian opposition has now consolidated control of that eastern city and its military airport after a fierce battle with the PKK-YPG group. We have Hassan Abdullah in Jarablus. I want to ask you, Hassan, what's the latest on the situation there in Deir ez-Zor?
Well, Randy, the opposition groups are trying to expand their control in the east of the country. Now, as you mentioned there, they have taken complete control of the city centre around Deir ez-Zor. They have the administration under control there, but they are moving outwards on the outskirts. Now, this is where there has been some resistance. And, of course, the sort of landscape they have there basically necessitates that they're probably going to be engaging in some sort of guerrilla warfare around those areas. We do understand also that there have been quite a bit of casualties around there, but they're saying that there's a growing number of Arab tribes around there who are offering their support. Basically, what had happened there was that some of the Arab tribes, members of the Arab tribes, they have been saying that they were supporting the SDF, of which the YPG terrorist organization is the largest component, out of compulsion. And they say that they had many reservations. They're also talking about attempts by the YPG to change the ethno-demographics in some of the areas. So they were saying that it was out of compulsion they had been supporting when they saw the advance of the opposition groups and the fact that these groups had been consolidating position. They contacted them and they announced that they're going to be switching sides. That, of course, pave the way for these opposition groups to move in. So at the moment, as far as the east of the country is concerned, they're trying to expand their control. Let's move to the west of Deir ez-Zor. We come into Aleppo province. Now, around here, there were a number of pockets that had been captured by the YPG terror group as the Assad regime forces were withdrawing. And in many areas, they had basically left behind their heavy weapons as well. The YPG had taken those weapons as well. The SNA, the Syrian National Army, fought in many of these pockets and took control of these areas. One of the areas to the west of the Euphrates River, of course, was Manbij city. Now, this had been a stronghold of the YPG since 2016 occupation. It's a primarily Arab area, but again, the people there had been complaining. Now, the opposition moved in. They have taken complete control of the city, but they are talking about some of the challenges that they're still confronted with. Earlier, we visited Manbij, and here's a report we filed. The Syrian National Army says it has taken complete control of Manbij city. This city had been under the control of the YPG terrorist organization since 2016. Now, while the members of YPG have left the area, authorities here are talking about two challenges. One of those is the presence of YPG sleeper cells. They're saying that they have to make sure that those sleeper cells have been cleared. The other challenge is the presence of improvised explosive devices and mines. Now, this is the main road connecting Manbij to Jarablus. It goes towards the north of the country, and also there are other intersections around here. They've sealed this road at the moment because just a short while ago, they found some improvised explosive devices on the roadside. They're digging through this road at the moment, and they're saying that they may have to carry out a controlled explosion. So they've closed down this important road, and they're saying that they simply cannot take any risks. We've asked them how many mines they think could be planted around this area. They're saying that so far they've managed to neutralize a large number of mines and improvised explosive devices, but they cannot give an exact figure at this point in time. A few minutes later, they went ahead with it. For now, the partially damaged road has been reopened for traffic. Let's now move to the northeast of Manbij, and we end up in Jarablus. Now, behind me, it's a bit dark, you obviously can't see, but earlier in the day, there had been a number of strikes carried out in an area known as Ain al-Arab. Now, this is being controlled by the YPG terror group at the moment. There were some intense airstrikes, and many of them were carried out, more than a dozen. And it's not entirely clear at this point in time whether those airstrikes have been carried out by the Syrian National Army, or whether it was shelling, or whether it was the Turkish military that targeted those places. But we do know that Turkey has been targeting some of the assets of the YPG. They're talking about the YPG getting hold of a lot of military hardware from the fleeing soldiers of the Assad regime, including some tanks. And according to the Turkish side, they've already destroyed a number of tanks that the YPG had got their hands on, and also other military hardware. So they're saying that they're going to continue to strike these areas, and also areas if you move to the east of Euphrates River, around Qamishli, of course. That's one of the areas of interest for the Turkish side, because, of course, the presence of YPG is so close to the Turkish border. And this is one of the areas from where the YPG in the past has tried to make infiltration attempts into Turkey to carry out terrorist attacks. Of course, if you look at the opposition groups here, there is this convergence between them and Turkey in terms of combating the YPG terrorist group, because according to the opposition here, the YPG is a separatist terrorist organization, and that poses a threat to the unity and political integrity of Syria. That's something they cannot afford, especially at the critical time when they're working on the formation of a new government.
Thank you so much, Hassan Abdullah there in Jarablus. Thank you for that update, Hassan. Well, as you can see, and as you've heard, there are a number of challenges that this new government will have to tackle. Even right now, we can hear explosions in the distance. Obviously, Israel is continuing to carry out its air campaign around here, targeting various military sites, and the interim government that's just now getting organized, working with the outgoing administrators, people that had served under Bashar al-Assad, willing to work through that transition, trying to bring more security to the country, trying to bring about a sense of justice, welcoming back political exiles, and trying to take care of the millions of people living in poverty and displaced. Let's go back now to Oscar in Istanbul.
Randolph Nogel in Damascus, as well as other correspondents across the region. Thank you so much for bringing us such a comprehensive update from Syria.